Hey, welcome to Coffee and Chatter. Uh, this is not something I relish, but this has been bubbling up, festering for a long time. So, current circumstances demand that I address this topic. I'm calling this one the Incorporation or the Capitulation of the Church. Which is it? Okay, I'm certain this is going to ruffle some feathers and I'm going to get some pushback, but as I stated, this has been a long, long time coming, at least 15 or 20 years since I formed opinions on this subject. And the time has finally come to air it out. It would be remiss of me to walk away from it at this point. As it is, the lives of my children, my grandchildren, and beyond hang in the balance. So it really needs to be dealt with. I want to state up front that I am thankful for the opportunity that has been provided to my grandchildren to get a quality and a spiritual education provided by the Christian school they attend. And I'm thankful for the church that sponsors that school. That said, there's something that stinks in Denmark. I'm going to go over a letter that was sent out to two of my daughters whose children, my grandchildren, attend this local Christian school organized by a local Bible church. So this is the start of the whole issue, so let me go over these letters. Okay, so here's a letter sent out on August 10th. Dear Christian school families, in Matthew 8, 1 through 13, the centurion states in verse 9 that he is a man under the authority of some, yet with authority over others. XXX is an educational institution under the authority of Governor Phil Murphy, the NJDOE, and the NJDOH, with some authority as a Christian school to have leeway in some areas. This past Friday, the 6th of August, Governor Murphy made an announcement about schools and masks in New Jersey for the beginning of the 2021-2022 school year. And then there's provided a link to the executive order, which I can provide later. Leadership of XXX, along with the XX church leadership, as a ministry of the church, are going to follow this mandate for masks. Our latitude is found in the medical and academic exceptions exemptions in the link above, with our continued allowance for face shields as a mask substitute. Please find the ones that apply to your student or students. Mask and face shield breaks will continue to be built into the day. Face coverings will not be worn outside, during snack breaks, at lunch, and during other times as well. Also, we will resume the use of lockers and the cafeteria, as well as switching room for all applicable classes. XXX faculty, staff, students, and families are still allowed to pray, have Bible classes, conduct chapel services, and learn from a Christian worldview. And this final line really surprises me. May we thank God daily for the freedoms we do have. Sincerely, Mr. X, from the XX Christian School, a superintendent and lead administrator. All right, so there you have it. Admittedly, this has begun to cause my blood to boil. My initial thoughts that I forwarded my daughters to use in any response they choose to make, I'm going to go over them right now. So, the reference to the centurion in Matthew 8, 1 through 13 is way off base. The centurion was an employee of the state, and he was referring to the way the authority structure worked. It was not a this. I'm sorry. It was a this is like that. It was not a this is that. So it was not a direct reflection of our situation now. He was. We're taking it way out of context. And I'm not sure that the authority structure of the state and the church overlap. I don't know where they overlap at all, nor should they. Jesus told us that we should give unto Caesar that which is his, and unto God that which is his. The children of Christian parents are charges from God to be raised in the ways of God, not under the authority of the state. Peter told the church authorities attempting to scare him off and silence him that he felt obliged to obey God rather than man. Pay attention. The church was compromised at that point. Allow me to, please, to share a dirty little secret that the church likes to ignore. I think for financial reasons, but tax exemption. The church sold its birthright for a mess of pottage when it incorporated under the state, making it an entity of the state, and thereby giving some of God's glory to the state. The church, above all, should know that one cannot serve God and mammon. What is the desire for tax exemption other than seeking of mammon? Why has the church traded away its authority to speak to all of life, politics included, for a mess of pottage? Politics direct the life of the community. How can they be separated out of church topics? Yet the church has been forbidden through the 503C, I guess, I think that's it, to discuss politics. And the incorporated church has obeyed man rather than God. The church's right to address sexual mores has all but been forbidden. Can abortion issues be far behind? Romans 13, that's the one everyone likes to go to. Let me just quote a little bit of it. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Paul then goes on to say, this would be possibly the civil authority, something think it's referring to church authorities. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is a minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. That's from Romans 13. So I contend that when the state turns from rewarding good to rewarding evil, no Christian is obligated to obey. Do I need to list the evils of the state? Taxpayer-funded, government-sanctioned abortion, profligate spending of money that does not exist, but serves to bankrupt our grandchildren through taxation, the state setting itself up as God by demanding more than the tithe. When the state ignores the mandates of the Constitution, thereby ignoring the law of the land, it is not a terror to evil, but a terror to good. So Phil Murphy, the man that my grandchildren's school seems to think holds authority over the church, when he closed the churches, an unconstitutional act which the state is forbidden to do, to restrict via the First Amendment, and therefore against the law. He stated that the Bill of Rights was above his pay grade, and so he gave it no consideration when he exercised his tyranny. Is this the man, a self-proclaimed breaker of the law of the land, that we're suggesting the church should honor by yielding to his abusive mandates? Now, medically, which is a separate issue, masks have never been proven to effective, at least the mask we're asked to wear, have never been proven to effectively do what the experts have promised. But that's not really the issue. In fact, if and when the state mandates full vaccination, will our children in the schools be forced to do that also in obedience? Does that seem to fit within the guidelines of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Why would we again yield to covering our faces? Does that bring glory to God? What is the most visual, distinctive characteristic that God has given each of us that distinguishes us all from each other as children of God? Our faces. Cover it up, you don't know who I am. And yet the schools, and including the Christian school, is once again asking our children to hide God's special stamp upon their countenances, their face. Paul tells us a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. So the letter I quoted earlier closed with, "May we thank God daily for the freedoms we do have." What kind of statement is that? Let me refer to something that Edward Gibbon wrote when he wrote about the error in which Rome succumbed to undisguised tyranny. He said, "A nation of slaves is always prepared to applaud the clemency of their master, who, in the abuse of absolute power, does not proceed to the last extremes of injustice and oppression." Tell me how that differs from, "May we thank God daily for the freedoms that we do have." That sounds like capitulation. According to the law of the land, the Constitution, there are no limits to our liberties when self-practiced. Why would we be thankful for having half of them given to us? Frankly, I'm glad the founders of this country did not take such a milquetoast attitude towards our liberties, or we wouldn't be discussing whether we should be obeying government tyranny. We would just be doing it with our mouths shut, other than to say, "Thank you, may I have another?" Okay, FYI to anyone concerned. No, we are not thankful because we are being allowed to exercise some of our God-given rights. They are God-given. So no one has the authority to encroach upon them. Not the church, and certainly not the state. My prayer is that God will open the eyes of those in the church making these decisions. I would encourage them to read through the Bible and count the many times that God's people ignore the unjust commands of the state, Old and New Testament. The state's appointed governor of Judea thought he had authority over Jesus, but he was sadly mistaken. And Jesus told us as his people that the works that I shall do, I'm changing it here from he to we do also. And greater works than these shall we do. Are we living up to that? Okay, let's move on now from the letter to some real data. What would one think the percent of churches in America are that are incorporated? Do the numbers justify such an idea? In other words, does might, or numbers in this case, make right? I don't think so. Let's go to the charts, as Ross Perot used to say. So I have data collected in 2010. While there is no official directory for all the congregations in the U.S., it was estimated there were approximately, at the time, 350,000 religious congregations in the U.S. Of that 350,000, it was estimated that 314,000 were Protestant and other Christian churches. 24,000 were estimated to be Catholic and Orthodox churches. Non-Christian congregations were estimated at 12,000. So, of those 350K, how many were incorporated? That's an elusive number, and the searches I attempted with various changing of the wording did not return one item that hinted at any such number. I couldn't find it. Most of the searches yielded returns about why church incorporation was the best way to go. Not much objectivity there. I did find this. Churches traditionally, that means in the past, right, as unincorporated associations, but that operational format left the church and its personnel exposed to legal liability for debts, accidents, and harmful actions committed by employees under the church's supervision. So while I neglected to get the data, it's now I'm being reminded of reading at one point that when the Revolutionary War soldiers came home after the war, those that were maimed and needed care, the government wanted to give them subsidies, but most of them refused because they said their churches would take care of them. Right? Churches traditionally operated as unincorporated associations. They took care of their own people. So historically, what we're saying, it was not the practice of the churches to incorporate. Oddly, in the pros for incorporating, the idea of tax exemption for contributions was never mentioned in anything I could see, and I think that's the real cause, but that's just my opinion, right? Nor were the requirements made upon the church regarding allowable topics that they could address mentioned. In other words, the idea of, if you got tax exemption, you can't talk about politics. You can't get partisan. Frankly, I'm not that impressed by the reasoning to incorporate. The idea of incorporating to avoid responsibility and liability, that sounds modern. Who should be responsible for the debts taken on by the church? Are they responsible for them? Accidents on the church grounds? Isn't that what insurance is for? And harmful actions of employees of the church. Who should be responsible for this? More attempts to avoid responsibility because our culture has gone litigation mad. So, I did get one return in my search that looked like it might be helpful. It was listed as why churches should not incorporate. But when I clicked on the link, I ended up looking at a document entitled Incorporating Your Church, Why and How. And it was nothing more than a number of reasons as to why incorporation made sense. Again, not a whole lot of objectivity there. So let me continue my rant. One commentator on the inefficacy of masks available to the general public made this point. Put on a mask, stand next to someone smoking a cigarette or cigar. If you can smell the smoke, you can get COVID. A much, much smaller molecule than cigarette smoke while you're wearing that mask that you think is protecting you. The masks we're being told to wear, that our children are being asked to wear, they don't provide any protection. All they're doing is suffocating our children. So, the more I think about this issue, the more I become convinced that the idea that any church or any Christian school a church runs is under the authority of the state stinks to high heaven. There is no truth in Scripture that supports any such lie as that. Instead, all Scripture advocates against it. The XX church in question, in my situation, has passed judgment on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, taking instead the side of the state. They didn't. They resisted. In fact, the ordeal of the Israelites demanding a king in King Saul, and the warning that Samuel gave the people about such a request for, the protection they sought by government, and the inherent abuse that would occur under such circumstances, mitigates against the wisdom of any such idea. It's shameful, really. The answers needed in this instance, which are hard to come by, are: what does incorporation of the church under the state really entail? And what are the requirements imposed upon the church that would not otherwise be illegal? So what are they being told they can't do that if they were on their own, they would do? This is good. There are documents on the internet by law center groups that define issues that are verboten for the tax-exempt incorporated church to participate in. The fact that the issues raised need to be addressed by lawyers speaks volumes for itself. All right, allow me to address politics and how they affect the church. All right, Merriam-Webster dictionary gives this definition of politics. I'm going to go through them. 1A, the art or science of government. B, the art of or science concerned with guiding or influencing governmental policy. C, the art or science concerned with winning and holding control over a government. 2, political actions, practices, or policies. 3A, political affairs or business, especially competition between competing interest groups or individuals for power and leadership, as in a government. 3B, political life, especially as a principal activity or profession. C, political activities characterized by artful and often dishonest practices. 4, the political opinions or sympathies of a person. 5A, the total complex of relations, the total complex of relations between people living in a society together. 5B, the relations or conduct in a particular area of experience, especially as seen or dealt with from a political point of view. All right. The word politics is derived from the Greek word politiki or politica. Wikipedia tells us this: politics, from Greek politica, affairs of the cities, is a set of activities that are associated with making decisions in groups or other forms of power relations between individuals, such as the distribution of resources or status. By the way, what are those resources? Taxes. Your taxes. You're not involved? Okay. In other words, politics is infused into every area of our life. It is the business of how the community and the people of the community conduct business. I have often commented on the idea that people express that, I don't involve myself in politics. And my response, okay, because politics will nevertheless involve itself with you. In other words, it's inescapable. So, when you think your property taxes are too high, you think the sales taxes you pay on necessities of life are too high, you think your income taxes are too high, and that your township, county, state, or federal government is spending wastefully, that's politics. When you think that the regulations and costs imposed upon you by local, state, government to start a business are too burdensome, when you think you should be able to improve your house without being micromanaged by the state, when you think that the roads in your town should be better maintained, when you think that your failing schools receiving millions of taxpayer dollars are failing you and your children, that's politics. So when we're struck by a so-called pandemic and elected officials and the non-elected bureaucrats that they install to rule over us begin encroaching on our constitutional rights, that's also politics. When the governor or mayor mandates that we can't go to church, we can't have family gatherings, we can't visit our dying loved ones, our children can't go to school, ad infinitum. That's politics. So, you still think your life is not governed by the politics in which you claim you don't want to involve yourself? Now, I want to touch on one other point in the letter from the beginning of this post. In what way is the church and the Christian schools that the church establishes, quote, an educational institution under the authority of Governor Phil Murphy, the NJDOE, and the NJDOH. I guess that's Department of Education, and I imagine Department of Health. One word, Incorporation. As an entity under the authority of the ruling state government under which the Incorporated Church established itself. Now, one would have thought that when Governor Murphy began restricting liberty and forbidding the opening and operation of churches, hiding his intentions under ignorance and stating he had not given the encroachment of constitutional liberties much thought, and then made his tyrannical pronouncement that the Bill of Rights was above his pay grade, churches would have learned something, you'd think, right? Look, let me be very, very clear. At best, Governor Murphy is a fool. In reality, it's more certain he's a liar, because he's not stupid. I'm going to read the oath of office that Phil Murphy swore, with his right hand raised in the air to God and his other hand on the Bible. I personally watched Phil Murphy swearing in on YouTube video and have transcribed it here word for word. I, Philip Dunton Murphy, elected governor of the state of New Jersey, do solemnly promise and swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and to the governments established in the United States, and in this state under the authority of the people, and that I will diligently, faithfully, impartially, justly, and to the best of my knowledge and ability, execute the said office in conformity with the powers delegated to me, and I will, to the utmost of my skill and ability, promote the peace and prosperity and maintain the lawful rights of the said state. So help me God. Now, I challenge any church in the state of New Jersey to make a case as to why the governor of the state of New Jersey should be obeyed when issuing unconstitutional proclamations that clearly violate the oath of his office. Again, I reiterate, Phil Murphy was a Goldman Sachs investment banker. He is not a stupid man. I can't reach any other conclusion other than that Phil Murphy knowingly perpetrated a lie when he proclaimed he did not consider the Bill of Rights and didn't concern himself with such weighty matters, when in fact his fidelity to the Constitution was not only the first line, but was the mainstay of his oath of office. The body. I have a message for the incorporated churches of the state of New Jersey and elsewhere across the United States. When the son of Solomon, Rehoboam, rejected the plea of his father's wise advisors to pay attention to the leaders of Israel, who came to him asking for respite, saying, "Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you." He instead turned to his young advisors, surely lacking in wisdom and life experience, and took their advice, calling the leaders back and responding arrogantly, much like Phil Murphy did to the people of New Jersey, and said, "My father made your yoke heavy. I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips. but I will chastise you with scourges. Can the church learn anything from this incident? The leaders of the 10 tribes of Israel responded in kind, saying, "What share have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David." So I ask, shall the leaders of the incorporated houses of God subject their flock to the tyrannical dictates of a state aligned against God? As stated above, church can't serve God and mammon. What inheritance does the church have in the secular state? Should the state lead the church, or should the church of God lead the state? A last word to the leaders of the churches. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites. In other words, a state as it sets itself up in the place of God, in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I welcome and await any reasonable response. Please change my mind on this. Thanks for listening.